For this project, I read We Have Always Been Here, a queer Muslim memoir by Samra Habib. The first part of this book made me think a lot about family, gender, patriarchy, the burden of being a woman, of being a carer, always having to be in control, always being responsible, and the ways that these all interact with each other. Families are meant to protect you, but in the instance of Samra, her family didn't protect her, and they even enabled her harm. One of the first instances of this is when she is sexually abused by a friend of her father's. Her mother is, quote, too mortified to take her to a doctor. She didn't dare discuss it with friends and family for fear of people speculating whether she was still a virgin, the worst possible outcome. And Samra talks about how it became important to her to act as though this event was not traumatizing. Quote, even when I felt I was unraveling in front of her, I looked primped, polished, and indestructible, because that's how she wanted to see me. She took on the burden of being okay even when she was not. The second instance of this is when her mother arranges her marriage to her cousin, a man at least 8 years her senior. She is a young teenager. She describes the betrayal and horror she feels at this, and she talks about how it wasn't as simple as saying no, that it would be viewed as breaking a tie, a responsibility to her family. For years afterward, her mother would remind her how she didn't hesitate to sign the marriage papers, that this was an indication that she was okay with the arrangement, therefore absolving her mother of the guilt. But Samra was a child, and none of that was on her. Again, I think of the burden placed on women, particularly women of color, to be strong and to be carers. Interesting to see the ways in which Samra finds more independence after running away from home, but she still feels constrained and misunderstood in some ways. One aspect at this point in the book that I found really interesting was when she meets with some of the other women of color that she met on LiveJournal. And she quickly realizes that although they are all women of color, she's the only one without the emotional and financial support of her parents, the only first generation immigrant, the only woman to have had to struggle with a language barrier. I think that this part of the book really spoke to intersectionality and the diverse experiences of women of color. I really liked this part of the book also because she starts to really come into her own and begins to present in a way that feels more authentic to her true self. She dyes her hair magenta. She develops a personal fashion style that makes her feel more herself. She makes queer friends, and she starts questioning her own sexuality. She ends her second marriage, travels to Japan. I like what she writes about coming out. There are many ways. Sometimes the label comes first. Sometimes it's through action or experience. It might not be a single big moment, but rather an accumulation of little ones. The final part of the book is about Samra's relationship with religion and reconciling how to be a Muslim as well as how to be a queer woman. As she finds her footing and becomes more sure of herself, she comes back to her religion, describing herself as spiritually hungry. It feels almost serendipitous. She joins Unity Mosque, a prayer space that welcomes queer Muslims. And she notes that one of the most striking differences from the traditional mosques she attended when she was younger was that people of all genders pray side by side. Being queer and being trans isn't a barrier to this part of the Muslim community in Toronto. In Samra's words, she had finally found her people. Her experience at the Queer Mosque inspires her to starting a photography project in which she highlights other queer Muslims. Like the title of the book suggests, queer Muslims have always been here. It might just be that the world wasn't ready for them yet. Samra's photography project promotes the kind of queer Muslim visibility that she really could have benefited from as a child, as a young person. In Samra's own words, I wanted my subjects to look straight into the eyes of the audience and tell the stories of their struggles, fears, triumphs, love, and courage in their own words.